Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so I just woke up a little bit ago, so my voice is going to be deeper than normal throughout the course of this video. Those of you guys who don't know, my voice gets super deep in the mornings. It's kind of like, it can get really deep, like super deep. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, so we're continuing on with our story on Batman, right? And like in the last video where we ended this, of course, a fight broke out between Batman and Flashpoint Batman, right? Like Bruce Wayne and then his father from an alternate universe, Thomas Wayne, who was a far more extreme version of Batman, right? I mean, he had no qualms with killing or anything like that. And so when this fight concluded, all we saw was a hand just kind of reach up out of this giant pit. And we didn't know if it was Thomas Wayne or if it was Bruce Wayne. And so what this does is this basically kind of switches over to Gotham City, presumably with the defeat of Batman, with the defeat of Bruce Wayne, all indications that he hasn't been seen. We don't really know where he is, although we will find out. And then we just basically pick up with like the Joker and the Riddler. And it's kind of crazy here because they're driving in a police car and they are, for all intents and purposes, acting like police officers. And what they're doing is they're actually arriving at a murder scene regarding a character named Double X. Now, Double X is actually a guy named Simon X, or at least he's half of the equation. So back in 1958 with Detective Comics 261, the idea here for DC at the time was to create Batman stories that were rooted in science fiction, right? We've talked about that multiple times over the course of this channel, right? Like the 1940s comics were based on World War II, and with Barry Allen's introduction in 1956, DC sought to blend traditional superhero themes with science fiction themes because science fiction had become so popular after the end of World War II, and superheroes had dropped off in popularity after the end of World War II. And so creating a kind of winning recipe here with Barry Allen, the result was that going forward, science fiction was brought into the origin stories or to the ongoing stories of superheroes. And so with this kind of going down the way that it did, Simon X was introduced as a guy who believed that humans had what were called auras, kind of like an internal energy source. And the idea here was that he believed it could be harnessed and then be used for its own ends. The result was that everything went awry. And so the way this played out is you have X, which is essentially Simon X himself, and then you have Double X, which is basically his aura, his energy given physical form. It's basically got the same powers as Superman, minus like frost breath and things like that. But basically in this scenario, he's been killed off, and we don't really know why. And in reality, it's not really important that we know why. I mean, he's just a character that's been around for a long time. The real takeaway from this is that you've got Joker and Riddler who are functioning like cops, and they're saying cops things, right? They're talking to Commissioner, and then it turns out the Commissioner is actually Hugo Strange. And so the way things seem to be playing out here under the rule of Bane is that all these villains have taken over the role of cops. And it really doesn't make any sense, right? Because when the question is asked, like, are you going to set up the signal? Then the answer of Hugo Strange is yes, and they fire up the bat signal. So you look at that and it's kind of like, okay, this doesn't make any sense, because if Gotham City was taken over by the villain Bane, then you would believe that it would just kind of be allowed to descend into madness. What we saw with regards to the events of The Dark Knight Returns, that, you know, people wanted a communist state, so they got a communist state, and it wasn't what they thought it would be, right? Like, it was mass pandemonium because human nature was thrown into the mix, where people kind of consider themselves to be above such base level things. But, you know, giving humans the ability to do what it is, when they want, how they want, suddenly leads to absolute torment. Now, in reality, what you saw in The Dark Knight Returns was not a communist state. It was an anarchist state. That's basically what you saw. But the overall gist here is that Gotham has seemingly been taken over entirely by villains. And when the Batman shows up, of course, it's not Bruce Wayne, it's Thomas Wayne. And so the indication here is that Thomas survived and Bruce Wayne didn't, or Bruce Wayne's still laying down there at the bottom of the pit. We don't really know. Instead, what we get here are these small little pages where there's just a guy in this really cold suit making their way through like this freezing cold. And that's basically it, right? Like, we'll see that from time to time. We'll see like that page kind of thrown in there from time to time, but it actually becomes a huge point of the story later on, which is one of the reasons why I love Tom King's work. But from here, we switch over to Thomas Wayne, basically going down into the Batcave and being served by the ventriloquist, right? I mean, the ventriloquist kind of having his thing where he's really, you know, easily manipulated. But again, it's everybody who works for Bane basically running the show here in Gotham City. And Thomas Wayne is looking at all this and he's saying, okay, so Double X basically had super strength and had enough to fight to stand on par with Superman, which is true. But basically what he says is, if this was going to happen, if Double X was going to be taken out, then somebody big would have had to have been the one to do it. And what he's done is he's basically reworked Gotham City's seismometer in order to, you know, where it normally determines earthquakes, and instead focuses on singular locations and then keeps hitting to Two-Face. And so we don't know exactly what it is that's going on here. All we know is that essentially Thomas Wayne is picking up shakes in the ground and then saying, like, these guys have to be working for Two-Face or something along those lines. And so what we end up doing is picking up with Solomon Grundy and with Amygdala, who are working directly with Two-Face. And that's when the explanation really begins to come out, right? Because these guys are taken out pretty fast, but they're not taken out by Batman. Instead, they're taken out by Gotham Girl. Of course, if you guys remember, Gotham Girl being being kind of an allegory for Supergirl, who was brought in at the very, very beginning of Tom King's run, and it's sort of been free-floating and suffering from exposure to the Psycho Pirate's emotional manipulation up until this point. But she's been working for Bane, basically, and so it's kind of like she's sided with Bane's character. And so it gets kind of nuts, because when she goes in here and she starts fighting Amygdala and Solomon Grundy, it's obvious she doesn't really know what she's doing, and she's not really receiving proper training. And that's one of the big differences between Thomas Wayne and Bruce Wayne. Thomas Wayne, he wasn't necessarily as nuanced as Bruce Wayne was. Bruce Wayne was a lot more, not really subtle. I mean, he was insofar as like his ability to be stealthy and be very, very ninja-like, but in terms of his ability to train Robins effectively, he was exceedingly good at that. It was keep your mouth shut, be quiet, function accordingly. Now, Thomas Wayne has tried to do that. The issue is that Thomas Wayne lacks the ability to kind of full-on enforce that. It's one of these things where he has Gotham Girl as a sidekick, but doesn't really control Gotham Girl. And so the result is that she tears these guys, and doesn't really tear them, but like she takes them apart quite easily, and that's basically the end of that. And then of course like Two-Face puts the gun to his head and says like, if you keep going, I'm gonna pull the trigger and Harvey Dent's gonna be gone. And then Batman throws a batarang and catches him in the eye and basically severs the nerves in his brain that had these dual personalities. You know, not necessarily curing Two-Face, but really kind of screwing him up. And that's when we end up learning that what's been going on here is that Two-Face is one of the last few villain holdouts. When Thomas Wayne showed back up in Gotham after his fight with Bruce Wayne, and basically was establishing like Bruce Wayne is gone now, like Bruce Wayne's not part of the picture, Bane made his move, and Bane began taking over Gotham City. What he started doing after that was, in order to basically turn villains to his cause, because the Joker loves chaos, because the Riddler loves riddles, because they wouldn't readily serve someone else, he basically started using Psycho Pirate. And so he would bring them all into Arkham Asylum. He would have Psycho Pirate throw on his mask, and then he would basically have Psycho Pirate use the Medusa mask's ability to manipulate emotions, forcing the villains to become essentially henchmen and to learn to love Bane. And so that's really how he's controlling things. Two-Face is one of the last villain holdouts. He's like, no, this is my city. He's one of the last few villains who hasn't been captured yet, and using like Amygdala and using Solomon Grundy, they took out Double X, because Double X is a guy working for Bane that's been trying to basically capture and bring in Two-Face. And so it's kind of nuts when you get into that, because the way this plays out is Psycho Pirate comes in and basically puts on his mask and says, you love Bane, like you love him as a character. The other half of that is that Alfred is still alive, and Alfred's in Arkham Asylum, but all the various members of the Bat family are kept at bay, seemingly because Alfred's more or less being held hostage. I will kill you if you guys come in here. Therefore, they've all kind of been kept away. In this story right now, we don't know what they're doing. And so it's kind of a cool moment, because again, with Bruce Wayne making his way up into this monastery or this building out in the middle of nowhere, he's suddenly set upon by these guys who essentially look like criminals, right? And they work for Magpie, who Magpie of course works for Bane. And so Bane's reach extends everywhere, like all across the globe. It reaches all over the place. And it's kind of a cool thing, because what these guys say is that like, if he has anything worth selling, they should take it and then give it to Magpie, and then Magpie can sell it off to Bane, basically making them super rich. And they just kind of leave Bruce Wayne out there in the cold. And so it's kind of crazy, because it's one of these things where it's like, okay, this is going to be the end of Bruce. But when you get into this discussion, it's awesome, because one of the things that Alfred really displays here is an ongoing loyalty to Bruce. And he talks to Thomas and he says, I feel bad for you. And Thomas is like, why? Like, what would you have to feel bad about me for? And Alfred says, because I feel bad about you, about what'll happen when he gets back. When Bruce Wayne comes back, I feel sorry for what he's going to do to you. The other thing about this is it's somebody, this person who's been making their way up there has been either trying to locate or follow Bruce Wayne or what have you. And that's when this person really kind of starts talking to him, because Bruce Wayne's just kind of muttering to himself, right? Like, it all started on the boat. In the sense of Batman Volume 1, I Am Gotham, it started with like the arrival of the plane rather that was starting to go nuts, and then it brought in Gotham and Gotham Girl, and basically it all started in the very, very early days. The response of this person is, no, it did not start on a boat. It was started on the street. And we end up finding out this person is Selina Kyle. This person is Catwoman. She's here to essentially rescue Batman. And that's the cool thing, because remember, Catwoman does not work for Bane. Catwoman did not walk away from the altar. She did not walk away from marrying Bruce Wayne because Bane told her to. That was never the case. She was manipulated by her friend Holly, who works for Bane, into basically believing that Batman cannot be happy unless he's Batman. She's as much of a victim here as Bruce Wayne is. And so that's kind of the cool thing, because she's the holdout here. And I love this, because what it basically means is that like Gotham can be retaken by the combined efforts of Catwoman and Batman. It's pretty awesome to see. Like, it's pretty sweet to see how this whole thing goes down. But again, Gotham at the moment right now is in a very dark place. Villains who are masquerading as cops who kill regularly. The average person won't really commit crimes because they're terrified in the face of like supervillains and those individuals who aren't like traditional cops, right? right? I mean, like, if you look at it from like a psychological standpoint, it's true that like extreme punishment does not curb crime, but it's only because extreme punishment is carried out by like the average person, right? But like when you're talking about a supervillain, a person with the power to read minds, or a person to force you into believing that you're a rabbit and you walk around that way for the rest of your life with no control over yourself. I mean, when you're talking about things that are that terrifying, or they can just turn your body inside out, then fear will ultimately take over, and fear will be the guaranteed factor that will keep people in line, because the fear is so extreme as opposed to just normal circumstances. But again, it's an awesome story, and I'm really digging what it is that Tom King's doing. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.